Don't you just hate it when a game doesn't look anything like what it was supposed to? I know I do. And yeah, it's a fact of life that the announcement and the final optimized game are not going to be the same thing, but there's certain things that deserve particular attention. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 downgrades we hate in video games. Starting off with number 10, it's Far Cry's environmental damage downgrades. While games get progressively better looking through the years, many players still lament the what could have been scenario if the series had become more of an immersive sim sandbox than, you know, what it is. Remember Far Cry 2? Remember the direction that seemed like it was going in? As the games have gotten better and better looking, a lot of little features that made the world feel more real have gotten a downgrade. Chief among them being environmental destruction, especially when it comes to trees and bushes. In previous Far Cry games like 2 and 3, you could knock over trees and bushes with machine gun fire. In 2, you could even shoot off individual branches on certain trees. It was a really cool feature that they mostly kept for the third game, and for whatever reason, they stopped there. Far Cry 4, 5, and 6 all have unbreakable, bullet-resistant shrubbery, and I'm not sure why. Maybe baked-in assets make the game easier to stream textures, or they didn't want to put the effort into making breakable trees again. I don't know. It's one of the most notable downgrades the series has gotten, and because obviously the newer games in the series look way, way better than 2 and 3, especially when you're talking about 2. Like, yeah, the game had some really cool features, but it was not pretty. It was a real victim of the brown and gray Xbox 360 era, and doesn't hold up nearly as well as Far Cry 3. Now, these are pretty minor details to get hung up on, I admit, but it's one thing among many that make the open worlds of more modern games more sedate and boring compared to the reactive world of these older games. Yes, things like trees look way better, but they're more like a sculpture than like a living, breathing element of the environment. At number 9 is the weird-looking models in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas Definitive Edition. I think somebody forgot to tell Grove Street Games that remastered games are supposed to look better, not worse. Yeah, I know that that is a very blasé way of saying it, but like in obvious ways like resolution, view distance, frame rate, stuff like that. Clearly the Grand Theft Auto remasters do actually look better than their original incarnations, especially on console, but so many aspects of them are just definitively worse, especially if you compare some of the more egregious examples of characters. Most of the character models look more bland and lifeless compared to the original games, but San Andreas really got hit the hardest with the ugly stick. The characters in the original, while low polygon with blurry textures, actually looked like people and kind of conveyed emotion better, and even with the same movements mapped onto them, the textureless blobs in the Definitive Edition, they do not work. Certain characters like CJ's girlfriend Denise look so bad they didn't even bother trying to make her look similar to the model from the original game. The devs have gone back and fixed certain characters so they don't look quite as Muppet-like, but Denise looks just as weird as ever. When an old game comes to a new console, the baseline expectation is it'll look better, and in a lot of ways, the Definitive Edition does, but in a lot of ways, it also looks significantly worse than the original games, especially compared to the PC versions, which these versions very briefly replaced until Rockstar came to their senses and let people buy the original versions again, because on PC with mods, they're better. And number 8, they changed night for some reason between Dying Light 1 and 2. Downgrades don't just have to be visual. There's a lot of series that, for one reason or another, downgraded mechanics. Some could argue that Dying Light 2 is a visual downgrade from the first, and looking at the entire visual package, I would disagree. I don't think it's an insane argument to make, but overall, don't think so. That said, one of the defining features of the first game, night, was made so much worse in the sequel. And the thing is, this is both visual and mechanical, because it does very much change how the game looks, feels, and acts. The tagline of the original Dying Light was "Good night, good luck," so there was a heavy emphasis on how dangerous night can be. They did a great job making it so that you would dread the night, because when it gets dark, it gets really dark. You really can't see a lot without a flashlight, but using it would attract the attention of super dangerous volatiles who would come out of their nests at night and stalk the streets. There were risks associated with being out at night, but also rewards. You'd get bonus experience for going out at night, and Special Infected were a round that had bonus resources. It was one of the most innovative things about the game, and they almost completely gutted it for the sequel. In Dying Light 2, it barely even got dark at night. The only danger was that being in the dark would start the clock to you getting infected, which was a kind of interesting mechanic in the second game, but it doesn't take too long for that to just be an afterthought. Enemies were apparently more aggressive at night, but it's not like there were that many more of them, and there were no volatiles to worry about. They'd only chase you if your alert level got too high, which almost never happens. They totally neutered probably one of the most memorable parts of the original game. Fans were so mad that eventually the dev team went back to the drawing board and made changes to make the night in Dying Light 2 closer to how it was in the original, but the damage was already done. It took them more than a year after the original to make necessary changes. So it is better now, and should there be a Dying Light 3, I would assume that it will be good from the get-go, but it's not the same as Dying Light 1 because obviously it wasn't designed from the ground up, and I hope they learned their lesson. At number 7, taking up movement options between Battlefield 5 and 2042, a common problem when shooters switch to being primarily on PC versus consoles. But at this point, movement options on a controller are mostly a solved problem. Yeah, when leading got taken out of the Call of Duty franchise, it was annoying, but there was some justification for it, at least at the time. With Battlefield 2042, though, it's a lot harder to explain. A lot of movement options that have been present in the series were just completely removed from 2042. Manual leaning, high wall vaulting, scope zeroing, crouch sprinting, all of it was just gone. You just can't do any of this stuff anymore. Battlefield, always one of the more arcadey experiences compared to other massive multiplayer war games. But it still had more going than your average Call of Duty deathmatch. There's no confirmation exactly why these changes were made, but a lot speculate that it was to make the game more approachable and casual friendly, with fewer complex movement options to worry about. That, along with a lot of other glaring issues with Battlefield 2042 at launch, ended up making it a notorious bomb. Went down so badly, it kind of feels like kicking a man while he's down to say something now. It's just, I mean, it's hardly the only game to downgrade on the movement options, but it's one of the most noteworthy. In the grand scheme of things, too, it's hardly the worst thing about the game, but in comparison to the older games, it was super disappointing. At number 6 is Overwatch 2's forced downgrade. The positives and negatives of Overwatch 2 are up for debate, obviously. Some people hate that the game switched from 6v6 to 5v5. They hate how tanks work, how most classes have been reworked into more hybrid roles that can do more damage. But that's not really the issue here. Those are kind of opinions, very subjective things. The problem with Overwatch 2 isn't that it made changes. That's to be expected with a sequel. But it replaced the original game. When this game launched, you can't go back and play the original anymore. It just completely replaced it, even though the first game you had to buy, while Overwatch 2 is free to play. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's like if Destiny 2 had completely overwritten Destiny 1 and they took out half the campaign. Actually, Destiny 2 does have its problems with vaulting content, so maybe that's not the best example, but you get what I'm saying, right? Overwatch 2 took out a bunch of maps in the original game. It removed more maps than it added, and a lot of those games haven't returned. They also added a lot more monetization, going free to play and all, and added a lot of annoying account creation restrictions at first. A lot of bad changes all around, even if the gameplay was seen as an improvement by most of the community. Just replacing the original, come on. At number 5 is the lighting in Dark Souls 2's trailer versus the final game. I don't think that anything will match the disappointment of the Dark Souls 2 downgrade, because the best I can tell, the original lighting model would have actively influenced and altered the gameplay loop. It's accepted that there's going to be some sweetening in game trailers, we've all seen it, but there's some occasions where there's a huge noticeable gulf between the trailer and the final game. This is probably one of the most notorious. If the trailers were to be believed, there was a heavy emphasis on dynamic, moody lighting in the game. So imagine you're surprised when the game boots up for the first time and it looks like this, flat. I mean, it doesn't look PlayStation 1 quality, but it really has the PlayStation 1 flatness to it. This is an ugly game at times. And even after it got a visual upgrade with the Scholar, the first edition, it's still kind of an ugly game. There's only so much makeup you can put on a pig. From Software almost never talks about game development, so why this change was made is a total mystery. There's speculation the lighting was too much for certain consoles to handle, or maybe the devs just thought darkness mechanics were annoying to deal with, but I don't know. All I know is the trailer showed off some pretty impressive lighting that is just not in the game. And number 4 is Paper Mario Sticker Star. Particularly notorious among Nintendo fans, this downgrade isn't the mechanics or graphics, but the character design. Sticker Star is a game with plenty to complain about gameplay-wise. It's awkward, kind of odd compared to previous Paper Mario games. But when people complain about it, the character design is usually brought up. Here's the thing. Up to this point in the series, every game featured fun alternate takes on classic characters. There's a Koopa in a hoodie, a girl Goomba called the Goombella, stuff like that. It took a lot of classic enemies and characters and gave them a unique look. So it's a little jarring turning on Paper Mario Sticker Star and seeing every Toad look exactly the same. All the enemies rigidly adhering to their original character designs. This is because for whatever reason, Nintendo started forcing the team making this game to adhere to strict IP guidelines, so they were very limited in creating new characters. So why Nintendo got so draconian with them, I don't know. It's not like they've never been afraid to take Mario in weird new directions. I mean, look at Super Mario Wonder or Super Mario Galaxy. I mean, Mario can be a Tyrannosaurus Rex with a mustache in that one. And number 3 is Crisis to Crisis 2, the open world transforming into a linear level-based game. This is less of an issue nowadays because consoles are a lot more powerful, but man, it was an annoying trend for a while. Like PC-centric games getting console-ified sequels. There's a lot of examples from Dragon Age 1 to 2, Deus Ex to Invisible War, but one of the last and most disappointing is Crisis 2 compared to the original. The first game is such a system melter that Can It Run Crisis was a meme for years, still kind of is a meme, even well past its point of relevancy. One of the reasons why the game was so notoriously difficult to run was because it had large, open, and extremely detailed environments, at least for the time. They were very open levels, gave players multiple routes through them at any given time. Wasn't a fully open world, but far more of a sandbox than most shooters at the time. So it was crazy disappointing to see the game's sequel be so much less ambitious. The visuals still impressive for 2011, but everything else felt like a downgrade. The levels were much more linear, with the expected little arenas broken up by corridors formula that was common for FPS games back then. It wasn't a bad game, but compared to how open and groundbreaking the first one was, it was a step backwards in almost every way. Sequels are supposed to be bigger and better versions of the first game, not smaller and safer, but EA wanted the game on consoles, and they thought this more streamlined experience was what console gamers wanted, and also, you know, consoles could not run Crysis. And number 2 is Fallout New Vegas to Fallout 4's dialogue system. A lot of RPGs revising their dialogue systems for consoles during the Xbox 360 era, but the series that really got it worse was Fallout. One of the most praised things about New Vegas was how many options it gave the player, not just in character creation, but in role-playing. Every conversation had multiple choices you could make, and it really felt like the game let you play however you wanted. Usually, if you want to say something in the game, the option's probably there. It rarely felt like the game wasn't giving you choices when it should be. So when Fallout 4 came out with its drastically simplified dialogue system, it really felt like a downgrade. There were way fewer options overall, and the ones that are there are much more vague, leading to issues where your character just says something you don't think that you're intending to say. The real problem is there isn't a lot of room to play a character this time around. Almost every dialogue option revolved around finding your son, which makes sense. I mean, if you were a parent, that would probably be your main concern, but this is supposed to be an RPG, and while I appreciate the necessity for a press X for Sean option, it should not be the only option in the game's dialogue choices. I mean, come on. In New Vegas, you could be nasty, kind-hearted, stupid, all kinds of things, but in Fallout 4, you're mostly just kind of bland. The voice acting doesn't help a lot, but the real problem is just how lacking most of the dialogue options are.
How is Austin doing? Do you think he'll survive the cure?
He's been unconscious since shortly after you left.
Almost everything else about the game is an improvement. Like, the shooting is so much better in Fallout 4. But if you're playing these games for the role-playing, it's a huge downgrade from New Vegas. And finally, at number 1, The Last of Us remake, Ratgate. Remember Puddlegate from Spider-Man PS4? Well, that's nothing compared to Ratgate. In one of the most truly despicable acts of downgrading ever seen, Naughty Dog cruelly removed the rats on the barbecue in The Last of Us remake. In the PS4 remaster, they're still there, but in the PS5 remake, look at that! 0 rats. Really makes your blood boil, right? All right, joke's over. You get what I'm saying here, though. A lot of times, downgrading complaints are overblown nonsense. Yeah, games don't look as good as in their trailers. Big whoop. In the 1990s, video game trailers were basically like cartoons. If they featured game footage, they would pile it on at the end, but they didn't always. And we kind of understood that Crash Bandicoot wasn't about a man in a parking lot yelling at an office building through a megaphone. The fact is, development cycles do end up changing things, and optimization often ends up in the game looking less good. Remakes in particular change things. Games get updated through the years. Stuff just doesn't stay the same. But what makes it particularly odd is that Naughty Dog actually heard the complaints and updated the game to put the rats back in. They made new models and everything, and that's dedication. Also, hell yeah, listening to the people, Naughty Dog. That's the way to go. Keep your customers happy, right? Credit to noticing it goes to Russian Potato Salad on Reddit, and don't worry, they weren't taking it seriously either. Now, with all that said, I do have a bonus one for you with the old-fashioned trailer downgrading of Watch Dogs. That was pretty shameless. Remember that one? That's a while ago, and we've talked about it since forever, but you know the deal. It deserves at least a mention here. That game got a huge backlash at release, and it's actually what forced all devs to kind of think, maybe we should be a little more realistic with our trailer. Yeah, the trailer's aspiration. This is what we want the game to look like, but we also don't want people to be set up for this kind of disappointment. It's not even that the game was ugly or anything, but expectations were sky high, impossibly high for an optimized game that was playable across a number of different platforms in retrospect. It's easy to look back and laugh now because there's no way the trailer would have actually been playable on PS4, but at the time, we all wanted to believe. The true crime is that many of these effects were left in the PC version. They were just turned off by default and were left out of the graphics options. Like, maybe this is a deal with the PlayStation that the PC version didn't look too good, or maybe it was just a lazy port, but the game had potential to look really good on PC, and Ubisoft locked us out of it. I guess they were just really committed to a unified experience and downgraded all of the versions. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.